Mr. Brown.
The ground rules of 10 minutes in opposition of no more than 5 minutes per person.
All right, 10 minutes in opposition, no more than 5 minutes. If you want to let somebody else speak, you better get.
My name is Vivian Fisher. I live at 269 West Hampton Avenue. My husband Jim Newcomb and I own 3 properties on South Spring Street. The zoning issue before you today concerns a very sensitive property. You know that we are a residential island in the center of Spartanburg, and the health of Hampton Heights is very, very important to the downtown's health and critical to the health of the neighborhood, as you pointed out earlier, is its perimeter. Consider that in the first block of Spring Street, there are only 5 residences. One of those, the one on the corner, which is the Office of the Preservation Trust, is already zoned office because it's next to Henry Street. And if you zone the second house, rezone the second house, there will only be 3 houses that are residences left. And that precedent for rezoning will be established, and you know that the request for rezoning, the others will not be far behind. A consultant who came to Spartanburg several years ago to study Hampton Heights strongly advised against downgrading the zoning of Spring Street because he warned that once the process starts, you can't stop it. And even now, several years ago, that fifth house requested rezoning. It was turned down, but I think that in the future it would be very hard to turn down those requests. And by the way, I predict that if that happens, the rezoning will be supported by the planning staff of the city based on their recommendation to the Planning Commission on January 21, and it's possibly in your packet. They said that 233 Spring Street, that since 233 Spring Street is located, and I'm quoting, on the most traveled portion of South Spring Street, the area between Beta Club Way and Henry Street could be considered more applicable in terms of rezoning from residential to limited office space. In other words, the staff is saying that the whole first block of Spring Street is better suited to limited office zoning than to residential. I hope that City Council, as well as the residents of Hampton Heights, will pay attention to that statement, or if acted on, it spells the end of Spring Street as a residential street. It seems to me that the arguments against rezoning 234 Spring Street are absolutely compelling and should be your only consideration in this case. I'm afraid for some of you, the wisdom of the zoning downgrade is not going to be your only consideration. In fact, it might not even be your primary consideration, because behind this request for a zoning change is the threat that if the trust can't move its office to 234 Spring, then it will have acute financial problems. I submit to you that your decision should be made solely on whether or not the downgrade in zoning will damage the street. It should not be based on sympathy for the trust. You should not consider it as an endorsement of the trust's work in Hampton Heights. That should simply not be your consideration. When the first potential buyer of 234 Spring Street realized that he could not use that house that he had proposed to buy under its present R8 zoning, he asked the trust to request zoning change for the house. At that time, the board of the trust refused to request the zoning change, and in a letter explained to the buyer the 2 reasons why they would not petition the rezoning, and I quote, 1, our seeking such a change is very likely to be strongly opposed by the residents of Hampton Heights, and 2, having taken such an action might affect the credibility of the trust as we seek to work in other neighborhoods. There might be the perception that we would be likely to seek rezoning anytime that it would enable us to further our mission of selling properties. The letter goes on to say that the trust might petition for rezoning if they had a potential buyer, and again, I'm quoting, with a well-developed plan for the property. In this circumstance, the letter goes on, we believe believe that the expected opposition by Hampton Heights residents might be significantly diminished. Finally, the letter says that a request for rezoning would be successful only if there were, quote, weak opposition from the neighborhood.
Try to finish.
Thank you, I am disappointed and disillusioned that the trust's primary consideration in asking for this rezoning is whether it will face weak opposition from Hampton Heights. I would have hoped that the primary concern would have been whether the rezoning would damage Spring Street and by extension of the neighborhood, and I respectfully request that you deny the petition.
Thank you very much for your comment. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Constantine Representative. I'm the person who the house is located. And in December of 2007, 2008, I sent a letter saying that in January of 2009, I could move forward. And I don't know if any of you noticed, but there was a little bit of a problem in the finance world in 2008. Since then, I have made their argument that they can't sell the house is completely not true, because since then I've made 3 offers. The second 2 were made with no zoning change requests whatsoever. So, for some reason they don't want to sell it to me, that's fine. I'm lucky I don't have to big fat mortgage, but I do have to say, you know, preservation trust is supposed to be about preserving neighborhoods and preserving architecture. And changing zoning just because they want to be a landlord all of a sudden, it doesn't make any sense. Their business is not to be a landlord. Their business is to preserve Hampton Heights. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.